Hale, today we are going to continue talking about functions. Now that we know how to identify a function, we are going to talk about evaluating a function. Much like we evaluated expressions, this is where we're going to be plugging numbers in. So now that we've identified functions, let's first talk about function notation. We have an equation here. And usually when we have an equation where we're graphing something, we have something that looks like this. Y equals, and then some numbers in X on the right side. This is a function, but we use now a function notation, which is what this is. Now, so far this year, when we've had something outside of parentheses, that's meant to multiply. In this case, it doesn't. This F, this fancy F with the X in parentheses, means F of X. In other words, a function of X. Again, just some fancy language, a fancy way to write it. But what this means is we can plug numbers in for X that will go into this right side of the equation, and it will give us an output. When we were talking in the previous lesson about relations having an X related to a Y and functions being special relations, where that Y value or the output value was related specially to the X value. There could be only one Y value for each X value. And we can use Desmos to help us evaluate these. What we want to find in this problem is we want to find F of -3. That's how we read it, F of -3. That means we want to know what is the function equal to when X is -3. What is Y equal to when X is -3? So we could rewrite this like this. And we would replace the X in parentheses with -3. And we could simplify the right side of the equation. Another way we can do it is we can type this function into Desmos exactly the way we see it, which I've already done. We want to know what F of -3 is, and you can see it's graphed this function. It should look like a function where I'm not gonna, where it's gonna pass the vertical line test. If I run a vertical line across it, it will only touch that thing one time. And I can tell the calculator now that I have my function, I would like to know the value, and you can just type this. I would like to know the value of F of -3. And it's going to plug -3 in for us and tell us that F of -3 is -8. That means on this line, on this function, there is a point whose X value is -3 and whose Y value is -8. So these are creating points that are on our function. The number I plugged in is an X, so that goes first. The number I get out is a Y. And if you remember in the last lesson, we had sets of points that we talked about as relations and functions. A line that we graph, or any line in the coordinate plane, is just a group or a set of points. And when we talk about it in terms of functions, the number we plug in is the X value. The number we get out is the Y value. And I'd like to note that sometimes if we're talking about several functions at once, we start using different letters. So you might see at some point G of X or H of X. And those are just different names for the functions. We typically name functions using the letter F for function. But if we have a few of them we're talking about at the same time, then we're going to go ahead and give them different names to show you that they are unique. So here I want to evaluate my function when F is 8. And so I can put this function, copy it directly into Desmos, which I've done. And now I want to tell it, and you can see here I have my function graphed. It's a curve. It's a collection of points. There's a bunch of points on there. One of those points is going to have an x value of 8. And what we're going to do is we are going to figure out what is our function when x is 8. And I put too many f's in there, so I got to take one out. It's going to tell us that our function is 7 when f is 8. And I can actually plot that point, or I can go find that point. When x is 8, I'm pretty close. Yep, when x is 8, y is 7. So that's what this means. When my function is 8, or when I plug in 8, my function is 7. That gives us coordinates 8, 7, and that point has an xy that is on this function. More on that in future lessons. Here we want to find out what happens when x is 8. What is our function when x is 8? Again, we have a different function, slightly different. If you need help typing these into Desmos, just let me know, because I've already set them up. You can see the picture looks a little different. We still have a function. If we were to do the vertical line test for this curve, we would only ever touch the function in one place. That's what makes that relation a function. We want to know what happens when x is 8 here. So where on the function, what value of y do we get when x is 8? So again, we can ask the calculator what happens when f is 8, or when x is 8, then f of x is -5. So again, I just want to keep reminding you that that means we have a point on our function that is 8, -5. 8 is our x value, -5 is our y value. I have one more to do together. Here I don't know what is the value of our function when x is -2. And let me just tell you again, what our calculator is doing for us and what we can do without the calculator is it's replacing x with the value we put in the parentheses there. So it's replacing x in this case with -2. It's evaluating the right side of our equation if we replace it with the same number we have here. And again, we could do this in the calculator, type this function in exactly the way you see it, and then ask the calculator, hey, what is the value when x is 2? And again, I've set this up for myself. If you need help, let me know. I'm plugging in -2 and I'm getting 6. So we have a point on this function, on this line, that has an x value of -2. That's the value we plugged into the function. And the output is 6. So we have a point right here. It's hard to get there exactly. -2, 6. So when we evaluate the function at -2, our answer is 6. What that means is we have a point on our function that has coordinates -2, 6. And we're going to talk more about that kind of stuff in the future. So for right now, we are practicing evaluating functions. And so I have 4 for you to do here. Please pause when I'm done talking and try these 4. If you need help while you're working through them, just let me know, call me over. And then when you press play, you should see the answers. If you get one or more of them wrong, that is an indication that you should raise your hand and ask me to come help you find hopefully just a little mistake or fix any problems you might have had. Press pause now, try these 4. So I'm hoping you press pause and you tried these on your own. It's okay if you got one or more wrong. This is the beginning of our learning process. If you did get one or more wrong and you can't see where you made a mistake, please do call me over and I'd love to help you with those. If you've got your questions answered and you feel ready to go, there are 20 practice problems to do. Please take your time on them. Put the correct answers in the question box when it pops up. Take your time on those. And whenever one of your answer boxes turns red because you got it wrong, please do raise your hand and ask me to help you find your mistake.